Hi, I'm Debbie, and I love the sunshine. As do most people, I'm sure. It's no secret that sunshine tends to make people happier. So when given a summer this year that's all wind and rain and terribly lacking in those skin cancer inducing rays that we all know and love,
Beach, yeah.
it's honestly left me feeling pretty sad and droopy. I'm trying so hard not to devolve into that person that does nothing but talk about the weather and complain about how they're gonna die from a lack of vitamin D. I'm trying. Oh god. The one thing that never fails to pull my attention away from the stark reality of life has always been a good old sewing project. So for the next few days I've decided I'm going to make a dress, because what better way to manifest sunshiny days than purposely not dressing for the weather. I bought this floral cotton fabric on a whim 3 months ago, and I know pink flowers don't exactly scream summer, but I think it's pretty, so I'll also be using elastic for the straps and this clear elastic thingy, which I'll explain later. Since this is my first video, most of you probably won't know my sewing history, but pretty much I am by no means a good sewer, but what I am good at is stressing myself out, and that is exactly what I'm going to do with this project. When it comes to sewing, you can either buy a pattern or draft your own. The tutorial I'm following shows you how to draft your own pieces, so right now I'm drafting out the 2 bodice pieces. Wait, I should have folded this the other way. Now I'm drawing out 5 rectangle pieces for the skirt. The one downside of drafting your own pieces is that the rectangularity of your rectangle pieces largely depends on how good you are at drawing perpendicular lines. I have a history of my rectangular pieces looking more like parallelograms. So this time I took extra care measuring and remeasuring to make sure that my lines were as perpendicular as they could be. And ugh, isn't it just so satisfying seeing those numbers match? I've run out of fabric. And I always get 2 meters, except for some bizarre reason this one time I decided to get 1.5. So here I am making a trip to Spotlight in the middle of a cyclone, not even knowing if the same fabric I bought a few months ago would still be there. So yeah, I pretty much spent the rest of the day cutting out my rectangle pieces, so enjoy this time lapse of me cutting out 4-sided shapes that have 90-degree angles. Ideally, have 90-degree angles. Let's start sewing! Now, with Cyclone Gabrielle well and truly upon us, it was a battle between my sewing machine and the wind to see who could drown the other out. Today also happens to be Valentine's Day. While it's definitely not the best, locking myself away in my study to sew and listening to Cyclone Gabby trying to uproot the trees around me is definitely a way to spend Valentine's Day. Now, this wasn't part of the original tutorial, but because I suck at hemming so much, I'm going to iron it out first, so it's a bit easier to put through the sewing machine. I've literally been trying to iron it out for the past half hour. Oh my wind. Hemming, without a doubt, has always been my least favourite part of sewing. For some reason, something so straightforward seems to end up as anything but straight. You can see how focused I am here with how closely my forehead is sticking to the sewing machine. But despite my concentrated efforts, I only made it halfway through before I decided I had to stop, because to put it nicely, the hem looked like complete and utter shit. And while the bar I set for men is practically underground, my expectations for a hem is much higher, and by higher it needs to be perfect. So I proceeded to spend twice the amount of time undoing the work that I just did, because I'm going to redo the whole hem. It was 9 PM by the time I finished, and here I am taking a break on my bedroom floor, trying not to think about the long night ahead. Okay, break time's over, we have a hem to finish. Okay, I've just done the hem and it's 12 AM. I just can't fold straight. I think I just didn't cut this piece straight, so I was kind of doomed from the start. But It's definitely not the best, but also I've done worse. I'm not gonna lie, I still wasn't completely happy with it. I ended up making the hem a bit wider the second time round so it was easier to fold, but this made the bottom look a lot heavier than I would have liked. But while it was tempting to rip it all out and redo the hem for a third time, I'm not that much of a masochist. Yet. Last thing I'm going to do tonight is gather the 3 tiers and hopefully sew them together so I can at least have something that resembles a skirt. Otherwise it just feels like I haven't achieved much tonight, so hopefully this doesn't take too long. So to gather the 3 tiers, why is this so hard to say? So to gather the 3 tiers, I'm sewing 2 basting stitches along the top of each one and then pulling the thread so that the material gathers like so. Then I'm lining them up together to make sure that each tier matches the length of the tier on top, and once I was happy with that, I sewed together all 3 tiers right sides together and then sewed a seam down the side. And there you go, we have a skirt. I'm really tired today. I don't think this dress is going to take this long to make, but I guess when you suck at hemming this much, that's to be expected. But enough complaining, here's the face of someone who's very much ready to get going. Let's go. One thing I forgot to cut out with the rest of my pieces were the straps of the dress, so that's what I'm measuring out right now. I went for a 9cm wide elastic, so the straps I'm cutting out are 20cm wide. Here I'm ironing along the fold so it makes my life easier when it comes to sewing each strap. I turn the straps right side out using a safety pin and then use the same safety pin to pull the elastic through. And after checking the length of each strap, I was ready to move on to the bodice. I may or may not have just broken my sewing needle. I usually have a spare set, but I forget that I usually use mum's sewing supplies, and this is the first time I'm using things that I've bought myself, and I forgot to buy spare needles. I'm going to see this as a sign that I should sleep. But apparently I can't read, because literally a few minutes later I decided that I was finally feeling masochistic enough to undo the entire hem and sew it a third time. It just bothers me. Like, it's just so crunchy looking. That's the only way I can describe it. I know people aren't going to be looking at the hem that closely, but I've already put so many hours in this dress. Plus I realized last night that I hemmed the skirt before I sewed the side seam, while the tutorial tells you to sew the sides before you hem the skirt. So now the seam is awkwardly sticking out. So what's 2 more hours of mindless seam ripping? Day 4 and we are finally on the home stretch, as long as I don't break all 5 needles that I just bought today. Here I've got the 2 bodice pieces right sized together with the straps pinned in. As you can see, there's a lot of starting and stopping of the sewing machine, and I had to constantly lift the presser foot to maneuver around the piece, so compared to the skirt, the bodice was definitely a lot more challenging. The last thing for the bodice is adding the clear elastic I mentioned earlier. I'm going to sew along the neckline to stabilize it, and this stops it from stretching too much. And with that, the bodice is complete, and now it's time to attach it to the skirt via a skirt attaching time lapse. Look at that, I'm almost done. I literally just have the hem to do, the final bust, and then I'm gonna be done. I'm so excited. I'm so over this project, but we are almost there. Yes! That's my mess. My room's a mess right now. I'm done. Oh my life, I am finished. Even though it did take 3 more hours to redo the hem a third time, I am so glad I decided to, because look, it's so much neater. Fun fact for y'all, this dress was actually finished on my birthday. And I'll be honest, I did have a lot of mixed feelings when I cut that final thread at 2 AM. Being confronted with the fact that I'm entering my mid-20s sewing by myself in a tiny room did initially make me feel major birthday blues. But also, this dress turned out so much better than I thought it would, so go 23-year-old me. Also, I know it's been 3 months since our summer ended, but you know how I said I was going to manifest good weather with the making of this dress? Well, here's the forecast for Auckland back in February. So I started this dress on the 13th and finished it on the 16th. So if you remember enjoying the sunshine on the 17th and 18th of February 2023, you are very, very welcome.